We live in an era that glorifies strength. In a world where image often outweighs essence, the ability to appear unshakable, to always be in control, has become a silently demanded virtue from everyone. From childhood, we learn that showing weakness is dangerous. Tears are interrupted with phrases like, "Swallow your tears," "Get up and keep going," "Don't be weak." And so, little by little, the idea that we must be strong all the time becomes rooted in the collective unconscious. The result is an army of individuals who wear an invisible armor every day, a mask of constant strength. Men and women who, on the outside, seem to have everything under control, their careers, relationships, families. But inside, they carry an increasingly unbearable weight. In silence, because admitting that they are not well would be seen as failure, as weakness. But what if this demand for constant strength is not strengthening us, but destroying us from within? This is the provocation that authors like Gabor Maté and Erich Fromm present to us. According to them, this socially constructed mask not only distances us from our essence, but imposes a high price on our physical and mental health. The continuous repression of legitimate emotions generates chronic tension, a constant state of alert that wears down the body and corrupts the mind. It is no wonder that we live in an era of silent epidemics. Anxiety, depression, autoimmune diseases, and psychosomatic disorders are becoming increasingly common among those who supposedly can handle everything. This video seeks to reveal the hidden mechanisms behind this ideal of strength that has been sold to us. It is not a superficial self-help discourse. It is a deep analysis based on the thoughts of Maté, Fromm, and other great scholars of the human psyche that dismantles the illusion that being invulnerable is the path to health and respect. Prepare for an uncomfortable and revealing journey, because you may discover that this strength of yours, so praised and admired, is, in fact, consuming you from within. And that the true path to healing and freedom begins when you allow yourself to finally be human. The demand to be strong all the time is not just an individual choice, it is a carefully constructed cultural trap built over decades, or perhaps centuries, that seeps into every aspect of modern life. It is not merely a familial or personal expectation, it is a social imperative fueled by an economic and political system that values the appearance of invulnerability and autonomy above any other human trait. At the core of this culture is the ideology of late capitalism, which Erich Fromm masterfully analyzed in The Sane Society. Fromm argues that we live in a society where having has replaced being. A person's value is no longer in their authenticity, their capacity to feel, or their emotional depth, but in their ability to display success, control emotions, and maintain the image of someone unflappable. Life transforms into a constant performance. We are evaluated by external metrics: productivity, status, social visibility. Vulnerability, in this context, is not a sign of humanity, but a flaw to be corrected or hidden. This mentality manifests from childhood. Children who show intense emotions are quickly taught to control themselves. Don't cry. Swallow your tears. Be strong. Boys, especially, receive rigid emotional training. Crying is for the weak. Expressing fear or insecurity is unacceptable. But it's not just them. Girls, over time, are pressured to demonstrate emotional strength, especially in the corporate world or when taking on multiple roles in modern society. The girl boss culture of the woman who handles everything without ever faltering is just another version of this trap. Social media amplifies this phenomenon to unprecedented levels. We live under constant surveillance, not from an authoritarian state, but from the collective gaze of digital masses. Instagram, LinkedIn, TikTok, all these platforms reinforce the need to appear in control, happy and strong. Weaknesses are carefully edited out of the frame, and so the pressure becomes relentless. Showing suffering risks reputation, compromises a carefully constructed image. Even in moments of crisis, we are compelled to smile, to demonstrate resilience, to use pain as fuel for a narrative of overcoming. Suffering transforms into personal marketing. The consequence of this environment is the growing alienation from the authentic self. As Fromm describes, the individual comes to exist in relation to the mask they have built. The more perfect the exterior, the emptier the interior becomes. Instead of feeling like complete human beings, entitled to doubts, fears, and vulnerabilities, we begin to see ourselves as products that need to be sold to the market, whether the job market or the social market. The authentic self is lost beneath layers of persona, and genuine connection with others, and with oneself, becomes increasingly rare. This dissonance between the appearance of strength and internal reality generates a state of chronic emotional tension. Maintaining the facade of invulnerability requires immense psychic effort. The body becomes a silent battleground where repressed emotions, sadness, anger, fear, continue to exist, but are constantly pushed into the unconscious. This repression, as we will see, is not neutral. It triggers physiological processes that erode health. The alienated individual, who does not allow themselves to feel, inevitably becomes ill. But how exactly does this emotional repression transform into physical symptoms? How does the body respond to this invisible psychic burden? The answers to these questions emerge clearly in the works of Gabor Maté, who reveals the hidden cost we pay for sustaining this mask of strength. In the next part, we will delve into Maté's insights and explore how the body says no when the mind insists on saying yes. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. When we talk about strength, we usually think of muscles, mental endurance, resilience in the face of adversity, but we rarely reflect on what happens in the body of someone who, day after day, forces themselves to maintain that unshakable facade. According to Gabor Maté, this emotional repression has a profound cost, a cost that sooner or later the body will demand. In When the Body Says No, Maté argues that there is a direct connection between emotional health and physical health. The body is not a machine isolated from the psyche. Emotions are not mere transient states of the mind. They are biological processes that interact directly with the nervous system, the immune system, and hormones. When these emotions are repressed, when the individual refuses, or is socially conditioned to refuse, to feel sadness, anger, fear, or vulnerability, this psychic conflict does not disappear. It shifts to the body. Maté describes how patterns of chronic emotional repression are linked to a range of diseases, from autoimmune conditions like multiple sclerosis, lupus, and rheumatoid arthritis to cardiovascular diseases and cancer. When someone spends years trying to be strong, hiding their deepest emotions, their nervous system remains in a state of continuous alert. The hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, responsible for regulating the stress response, is constantly activated. The body produces high doses of cortisol and adrenaline, which over time erode physiological balance. Furthermore, emotional repression weakens the immune system. Studies in psychoneuroimmunology show that individuals who suppress their emotions have weaker immune responses, making them more susceptible to infections and chronic diseases. And it's not just about physical illnesses. Anxiety, depression, and the chronic feeling of emptiness are manifestations of the same process. The body and mind screaming for an emotion that was never allowed to emerge. Maté illustrates this with numerous clinical accounts. Patients who, for decades, maintained a profile of extreme kindness, altruism, and a compulsive need to please others, always saying yes, always being the pillars of the family or workplace, often develop serious illnesses, not because they are weak, but because they were too strong for too long. Their body finally says no, when the mind insisted on saying yes. This pattern is more common than one might think. Perhaps you know someone like this. Perhaps you yourself are that person. Someone who always carries the weight of the world on their shoulders, who never allows a moment of vulnerability, who feels guilty just thinking about asking for help. But the truth is that this behavior is not sustainable. Sooner or later, the body reacts. Because there is a limit to repression. There is a price for this artificial strength. But where does this persona of absolute strength come from? Why do so many of us learn to build this emotional armor, even knowing, often unconsciously, that it destroys us? In the next part, we will explore the psychological roots of this phenomenon. How the persona of strength feeds the repressed shadow, creating a cycle of self-sabotage and silent suffering. To understand why so many of us cling to this mask of strength, we must dive into one of the deepest concepts of analytical psychology, the dynamic between persona and shadow. Each of us builds throughout life a persona, a socially acceptable image that we present to the world. It is shaped by the expectations of culture, family, school, and the work environment. It is a necessary adaptation. No one survives socially by showing all their vulnerabilities and deepest desires. But the problem arises when we confuse the persona with our true self. In the case of the strength persona, this identification becomes even more dangerous. When an individual comes to believe that their worth lies in always being strong, always resilient, always invulnerable, everything that does not fit this image, fear, sadness, fatigue, insecurity, is pushed into the depths of the unconscious. This repressed material does not disappear. It accumulates in what Carl Jung called the shadow. The shadow is composed of all the aspects of the psyche that we reject or deny out of fear or shame. And the more we feed the strength persona, the more the shadow grows. Unconfronted fears, unexpressed hurts, denied weaknesses, all of this becomes a hidden source of tension and internal conflict. The individual begins to live a psychic split. On one side, the public image of self-control and strength. On the other, an underground sea of repressed emotions. This dissociation comes at a very high price. The more rigid the persona, the greater the pressure exerted on the shadow. This generates psychic symptoms such as chronic anxiety, panic attacks, depression, and physical symptoms such as the autoimmune diseases described by Gabor Maté. The body becomes the stage where the shadow tries to manifest, where the repressed truth of the psyche seeks, at any cost, to be heard. Furthermore, this repression feeds a cycle of self-sabotage. The individual begins to emotionally isolate themselves. The more they try to appear strong, the less they can ask for help. The shame of their own vulnerability prevents them from genuinely connecting with others. Relationships become superficial. Emotional loneliness deepens. And the greater the isolation, the greater the need to maintain the mask. A vicious cycle sets in. The most tragic part is that this pattern is widely reinforced by culture. As we have seen, we live in a society that rewards performance and punishes vulnerability. The strength persona is often publicly celebrated. The heroes of everyday life are those who never fail, who do not show emotions, who face everything with a smile on their face. This narrative not only legitimizes repression, but also makes it even harder to break free from it. But there is a way out. And this way out begins by questioning the very ideal of strength that has been sold to us. What does it really mean to be strong? Is this quest for invulnerability actually blocking our growth and healing? This is what we will explore in the next part, where we will unmask the false ideal of strength that hinders genuine development and traps us in silent suffering.